adieu to you and you and you.
This is TalkSport Extra Time. I'm Mike Graham, and of course I'm joined in the studio right now, as I always am at this time on a Monday evening. It's a stroke Tuesday morning, Mr. Mike Porky Parry. Very good morning to you, Mr. Parry.
A very good morning to you, Mike, and it is, you know, without being melodramatic, a very historic day in the world of football.
It actually is. I tell you what, I mean, you and I were talking earlier in the day about how this was probably the biggest story currently going around the world.
Yep.
I think you're absolutely right that it was. Just before I say anything else, though, Tassima has sent this in on social media, talking about that last caller I had, a Scotsman who was rather worked up, saying, are you sure you haven't got David Moyes in disguise on the phone? Because the guy was very vitriolic. There is this whole thing about, you know, Scots and English and all of that, which I don't think applies in any way in this kind of situation. But there's no doubt that this is a massive story, and that David Moyes, I think, is out of a job pretty much in the next 24 hours.
He could be out of a job for quite a long time, because one of the aspects we're going to explore, you know, during the course of discussing this story is where does David Moyes go next? Yeah. It's very difficult when you've been so publicly emasculated at the biggest football club in the world. Yeah. To be offered a job anywhere else, because you're automatically going to be branded the reject from Manchester United.
Well, exactly, and also failure, as they often say, or they say, success has many hands, failure has only one. Now, it may well be that the players are to blame.
It's very philosophical.
It is philosophical, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things that I used to get told in newspapers all the time. It was like, if you mess this up, you're going to be the guy who gets blamed. Sure. And I mean, you and I both had that situation, right?
Sure.
But you know, regardless of whether the players didn't want to play for him, regardless of what a chalice was poisoned that he was handed by Sir Alex Ferguson, in the end, he will be seen as the guy who couldn't make it work. Yes. And you're quite right, he will go probably for quite some time before even teams perhaps in the Championship. I mean, listen to this from someone who sent this in. He says Moyes should take a break from the Premier League for at least one season. A number of Championship clubs could inevitably be looking for new managers in a few weeks' time. So Moyes at Reading or Forest or Middlesbrough or Blackburn, for example, is not unthinkable. Or the possibility that success for Moyes at one of those clubs will repair his reputation. That's already how people are talking.
Well, you know? I can't even see that happening, to be honest. I can't see how he can go to Reading or something like that and then get drawn against Everton or Manchester United in the FA Cup, and he goes back to the areas of success stroke failure in his previous life. I mean, I think he'll have to go abroad. Do you think it's any coincidence that towards the end of his time at Everton, he started talking about wanting to work in Germany and all this kind of stuff? Yeah, and
but I mean, we live in a global economy now.
We do. But what I'm saying is, you know, Steve McLaren had to go abroad to resurrect his career after the England failure. 20. Yes, exactly. That's the only way I think you can do it, because although it is the biggest story in football in the world at the moment, David Moyes' face will be on the front of newspapers in Australia, in Spain, in Singapore, and I don't know about South America, but certainly, you know, all the countries in the world which are firmly rooted in football. Yeah. And he is the biggest fall guy in football for, I can't remember since when. I can't remember when there's been such a tumble.
I was saying earlier,
it's only 9 months, Mike,
I see. I mean, I was saying earlier, this I think is the worst appointment in the history of the Premier League.
I think you could be right.
In any way. I mean, we've had the disaster of AVB at Chelsea and at Spurs. Yeah. But, I mean, with the greatest respect to Spurs and even to Chelsea, they're not Manchester United. No. And they weren't hand-picked by Sir Alex Ferguson.
I totally agree.
The board did not give them all his confidence, but much confidence by giving him a 6-year contract. It's a disaster.
A complete disaster. There was a power vacuum at United because David Gill had gone. Yeah. And the new guy, Woodward, didn't have a grip on the club. The equaliser. So it was left to Sir Alex Ferguson. Now, Sir Alex Ferguson adopted a very old-fashioned view, which probably indicated it was time for Sir Alex Ferguson to go, because his old-fashioned view was more of the same. Yeah. Whereas we all know in world football now, and in certainly European football at the top clubs, it never can be more of the same. It can't be more of the same at Barcelona after Pepe Guardiola, because it's not working, and it can't be more... I mean, you can't just, you know, Sir Alex suddenly couldn't, after, 27 years, say, right, I'm moving off the main platform and I'm going to shuffle somebody in there in my own image. It can't possibly work like that.
Well, I mean, we had so many Manchester United fans over the course of the season, and I'm not gloating here because it's not a question of gloating, but I said at the beginning he would be a disaster. I said that, Manchester United will not give him 2, 3, 4 years to get it right, like they gave Sir Alex Ferguson. And by the way,
absolutely right.
Sir Alex did actually win a trophy in the second year that he was in charge. Some fans are now saying, well, hang on, David Moyes did win a trophy with Man United. He won the Charity Shield. I don't count the Charity Shield.
Of course not.
I'm sorry, that's not a proper trophy.
Of course not.
There's only ever 2 teams in it, so you've got a 50-50 chance of winning it, But, in the end, you're quite right. It's 2014. We'll talk about the New York Stock Exchange in a little while.
Wasn't that open today anyway?
It was, yeah. Because,
so why is everybody saying, this had to be
Well, they're not quite getting it right. I explained
hours.
it earlier on the Sports Bar. Basically, the worry is that when they do finally announce that he's gone, not only will it be quite a big shock to the financial world, it'll be a total admission by Manchester United's board that they got the biggest decision that they've had to make in the last 20 years completely wrong.
And therefore a confidence factor situation.
Exactly.
And by the way, because I've been talking to people all day since this news started emerging at 2 o'clock this afternoon, one of the critical factors was that at the Liverpool game, when they got beaten 3-0 at home, the equaliser, Mr. Woodward, had invited a raft of potential sponsors to that game.
Right.
And they came away from it all sort of wondering what they were investing in and not sure they wanted to invest in that club. Agents all over the world, Mike, have been telling people in Britain, we're not letting our players go to Manchester United because we're not sure they've got a stable... And this is from the start of the season. We're not sure they've got a stable regime. So the idea...
And that makes a lot of sense why they only got Fellaini and Mata.
Well, I was going to say, when they were chasing Ronaldo and Cesc Fabregas and even Gareth Bale...
And Schneider again for a while,
And Schneider, absolutely right. It was laughable because their agents had already said, who is David Moyes? And quite rightly predicted the disaster that has now blown up in everybody's face.
He was the wrong man for the wrong job for all sorts of reasons. But I read a great piece in the Times yesterday, which was a report of his kind of after-match press conference after the Everton game. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yes.
But apparently after kind of coming out with all this nonsense, which you would have seen, where he said, we seem to be the better team in the first half, we had more of the ball. They didn't have one shot on target in the first half, right? Apparently when he finished this kind of soliloquy about, how he didn't really understand how they'd lost the game, he went to walk out of the room and he went out the wrong door and had to come back in.
Yes.
And doesn't that tell you everything?
Well, there's loads of stories have been seeping out of Old Trafford, and one of them is that the longest speech he's given to his players in the last 6 weeks was about their responsibility to welcome the new redesign of the club blazer and badge and the new tie. And somebody from Old Trafford told me this a couple of weeks ago that, he like what you've just said, he seemed to be incredibly involved in minutiae and wasn't getting to grip with the major issues at the club.
No. Well, of course, as we've said, not only was it a mistake that he was appointed, it was a second mistake to allow him to get rid of Rennie Mullerstein and Steve Phelan, and Mike Phelan, I should say. Why did I call him Steve? It's your influence.
Steve McLaren I was talking about. He was his deputy once.
The point is that, I can't believe that Manchester United allowed him to do that, right? And then just watched him, make one mistake after another, say the wrong. A lot of people have pointed out this thing where at one point in the season he said he looked over at Manchester City and their operation. And I know what he meant, but he kind of came out and said, we'd like to aspire to be that kind of club. And Man United fans went nuts.
Well, of course,
hear that kind of thing coming from your manager.
Of course they did, because United have actually evolved into, the great super, organisation they are through natural progression and what you would call like year by year growth.
Yeah.
City just had it planted on them, and they're run by men who run billion-pound oil industries as well. So they know how to run a big organisation, and United have fallen behind the ability to cope with their bigness.
Yeah. And that's kind of what he wanted to say, but it came across as a guy with the wrong attitude for football, for the wrong attitude. I mean, we heard Gary Neville there in the opener.
We did.
Really quite angry after the Everton game, saying, we're ruthless. We're supposed to be ruthless. We're talking about Roy Keane or Eric Cantona. Talking about people who'll step on you in order to win a game.
The passing was terrible, wasn't it? The Everton game. I saw one sequence today of 32 passes, and the ball never moved 5 yards up the pitch.
Horrendous.
It was just going to. And what you say about the backroom stuff is incredibly important. Phil Neville was pictured on TV today, and he was supporting his sister Tracy, who's the coach of a netball team in Manchester. And you looked at him; he's with his little lad and all that. And I'm looking at him, I'm thinking, that's a distraction, because I think you know what's coming next. Now, I may be very unkind here because we don't know what's going to happen to the backroom staff, but I can tell you a story that maybe illustrates the bridge between David Moyes and his players. Ryan Giggs turned out, Moyes selected him, and I don't know which game it was, but he turned out he's playing. Phil Neville leaps from the seat in the dugout on a bench, dashes over to the line and starts trying to tell Ryan Giggs how to perform in this team.
Oh, dear.
And at the end of that game, Ryan Giggs went absolutely bonkers saying things like, I do think I know what I'm doing, 11 Premiership medals, 2 Champions League medals.
Yeah.
I didn't leave the club, Phil. You did. You went to Everton, now you've come back. I've been here all the time. I know the thing. He went absolutely ballistic, but his anger wasn't levelled at his former teammate, Phil Neville. It was levelled at David Moyes for allowing that situation to develop on the touchline.
Of course, because why would he bring people from Everton where nothing had been won
to
a place where winning is everything?
To try and tell Ryan Giggs how to win things.
Shocking. Absolutely amazing. Mike Porky Parry's here, and we've got much, much more to talk about. He's going to tell us some stories about David Moyes from his time at Everton as well. We're going to take loads more of your calls as well. 08717 223344. It looks like David Moyes is going to be out of a job, and unlike Colin in Glasgow, I do not feel sorry for him. Don't worry, he's going to have plenty of money to keep him occupied during the downtime. This is TalkSport.
Crazy, but that's how it goes. Millions of people living as ho.
This is TalkSport Extra Time. I'm Mike Graham. He is Mike Parry. Together we are the two Mikes. There will be a podcast available, of course, a little bit later on. We had a very fascinating conversation last Thursday night when you were here for your extended version of events for 3 hours, because I was likening the whole game against Everton as a real watershed moment for David Moyes. In fact, because it was Easter Sunday, I said, he's going to either be resurrected or he might end up having his whole career completely and utterly trashed, because if he loses against his old club...
What you were hinting was he'd either be resurrected or crucified.
Well, I was hinting at that,
and I felt that was a rather non-biblical or unbiblical or suddenly unchristian to talk.
Yeah, you weren't too happy about it, but surely even you would have to admit that I've been proved right, and here we are now at a situation where, because he lost the game and because they lost it so badly in such a bad, terrible, hopeless way, he's gone.
You were proved absolutely right, Mike, and do you know what? Last Thursday night, I mean, putting bits of the jigsaw puzzle together now, it is suggested in some areas that one or two of the senior players actually knew before the Everton game that was it. There's even a suggestion that David Moyes knew the game was up, and that he insisted on being in charge for the Everton game because he was never going to be accused of not having the bottle to go back to his former club. You see what I mean?
But as a result, having lost both games, Everton do the double, first time since 1969. I mean, that's terrible.
I remember it. Do you know what happened in that season? We won the championship in 70. So at the start of the...
I don't remember.
Yeah, I do. At the start of the 69 season, we were on fire. We won away at Arsenal 1-0 in the first game. Then we played Manchester United in 2 successive weeks, home and away, at Everton and at Old Trafford. We won 1-2-0 and the other one 3-0. Right. And we went on to win the championship that season. That's how far back it was. You're absolutely right.
And that was a very poor Manchester United team, wasn't it?
Oh, it's shockingly poor. They're much worse than they are now in terms of their decline from their great days, because only 2 years earlier they'd won the European Cup.
Of course,
They won the European Cup in 68, And this was the start of their decline, which ended up with them being relegated in 1974.
Yeah, right. But Jamie Carragher came out in the papers yesterday to say that this is the worst United team he's ever seen.
Well, yeah, but he's not as old as me.
That's true.
And I've seen worse Manchester
United. He's better
looking
at you as well, to be fair.
Who is Jamie Carragher?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, he's got a rather sort of protruding jawbone, hasn't he? And I think that's
you're going to cast aspersions on Jamie Carragher's rugged good looks, are you?
Well, they're not rugged good looks. I mean, what you'd say about Jamie Carragher is this man was quarried, not born. They say that about Tommy Smith, although Tommy Smith was unfortunately very challenged in the good looks department.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, but he was. But anyway, no. The point is, Jamie Carragher knows a lot more about football than I do, and if he's saying that in his lifetime, that's a serious indictment. I mean, the stories about Davey as it's gone on have been legendary about, whether he had the players. I mean, what's really telling, Mike, is, because we'll have a look at the back pages of the papers in a minute for tomorrow morning, the first go on, but one picture which leaps off the page and smacks you in the face is Louis van Gaal with Rooney and Van Persie at I think it was an Ajax game in the last couple of weeks or something, or it might have, whatever it was. And, the point you're making there is that, and this is the way the story goes. When David Moyes first got there, he diplomatically, in his view, decided to address the players and said, "Look, you all start with a clean slate with me. You wipe the slate clean, and we all start again. Because it's a new relationship." Well,
in other words, I'm not going to look at you as champions of this or champions of that or anything like that.
Or if you've had problems with the previous manager or something like that, or if you've had, like Wayne Rooney, problems contractually with the club in the past and all that. This is what he was meaning. But of course, people like Rooney and Van Persie, who'd scored 30 goals last season.
Well, he'd won the championship for them. Scored that fantastic volley in the game, the final game they won it against Villa. That's right, with his left foot over his right shoulder.
Absolutely. And And Van Persie's attitude was, what do you mean I start with a clean slate? I'm one of the best footballers in the world. I'm one of the best forwards in the world. You're not going to treat me like everybody else as though, it's all normal and we're all equal. We're not all equal. Right. Don't you know a great player when you see one? And that was never repaired. I mean, we all know that. I mean, Van
Persie has been pretty much unfit for most of the season.
He's been in semi-retirement, hasn't he?
No, exactly. Let's take a couple of calls here because we've got loads of them, Mike. 08717 223344. Nigel is a Man United fan up in Inverness. Nigel, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Yeah, what would you like to say?
I just think we have to think outside the box here. That this is major. This is a major football earthquake. I think the Man United should go cap in hand to Mourinho and just say, "What do you want?" I think he would go. We were talking about Ferguson's ego and everything. Yeah. I mean, who else has that big an ego? Who could stand it up? They would hate him in London.
Yeah, and also who can handle these players with the kind of nous that you need? Because clearly somebody like David Moyes, and Mike's going to tell us about what a nice guy he is probably, because I'm sure he is a lovely guy.
He's very nice guy. Lovely
but you don't want to be a lovely guy in a dressing room with some of these characters, or else they'll eat you alive,
The hairdryer.
I'll tell you something, Nige. You're absolutely right about the Mourinho thing, and that occurred to me as well. Now, you know the history of this. You know the history is that Sir Bobby Charlton gave an interview in the last months of Sir Alex Ferguson's reign. We didn't know Sir Alex Ferguson was going, but speculation about the future, in which Sir Bobby Charlton said, we don't want his sort round here. Yeah. And he was talking about Mourinho. No, seriously. And what he meant was, I mean, look at the way Jose's been belligerent over the last week. He had a terrible press conference today in Madrid, terrible press conference after the defeat against Sunderland. Very grumpy, offhand, belligerent. And Sir Bobby Charlton was making the point, we don't want it. But I mean, Sir Alex Ferguson's been every bit as bad in press conferences.
Terrible. Well, he didn't speak to the BBC for years.
For about 7 years. But Nigel, you have made an excellent point. Of course Mourinho should have gone. Mourinho was begging for the job in the tie 2 seasons ago.
They could still get him.
No, I don't think they could, you see, because you've made a great point which occurred to me earlier, so I had a look around and made a couple of phone calls. The contract that Mourinho's got at Chelsea would cost about £20 million in release clauses just to get a manager. Well, I mean, you know...
No, that's worth it. £20 million.
Well,
it's worth it.
Yeah, but they can't do that anymore, Nigel. And this is why when Mike was saying, what about the New York Stock Exchange being involved in all of this? And, it's not that they have, the final say on anything that Manchester United as a company does, but because they're publicly listed on the stock exchange, they are responsible for the money they spend. They can't but they can't just do what...
If you're talking the markets, etc. Now, if you think about who's going to be the new Apple executive, it's got to be the top guy, the guy, and Mourinho is the guy that could handle it. He could handle everything. He would put it down to basics.
Yeah, but this is the problem the Glazers have got, Nigel, because they've now shown by admitting when this happens, and I don't think it's a question of if, but when this happens, the investors in Manchester United will say these guys are running a massive global organisation. They are now admitting publicly that they made a mess of the biggest decision they were forced to make.
Yeah, but they only made one mess.
I don't agree that it was a mess. I think
it was a mess. Well, it is a mess. You just said it was a disaster.
I don't agree. I think appointing Moyes was the right. In foresight, say 2020, I think appointing Moyes was the right decision. It seemed right, but he just didn't have it. He just didn't have it.
The mistake was not the appointment of David Moyes per se. The mistake was allowing Sir Alex Ferguson to have a complete carte blanche decision.
I'm staggered, Nigel. First of all, Nigel, we're talking about hindsight here, not foresight, right? But I'm staggered. I'm staggered that you think that it was a a good decision. I didn't think it was a good decision. He never won anything for
it was a dreadful decision. He couldn't handle big players.
No, it was a good decision. It just turned out the wrong decision. The guy didn't have it. The guy didn't have it. But Alex Ferguson's I would say, had the right to choose a successor.
No. Well, you just mentioned Apple. Let me just ask him Nigel, you just mentioned the Apple situation, right? Nowhere in any big organisation around the world would the outgoing chief executive choose his successor without anybody else's input. That wouldn't happen.
Exactly. What about the pressure on
football clubs are different. You can't.
Not anymore. They're not.
No, of course they're not.
Financially, they are, but they're different. The loyalty that's and the part of people's lives that's completely
Nige, remember, Sir Alex Ferguson was getting older. Now, if he wanted to appoint a man in his own image, that in itself should have rung alarm bells, because Manchester United have to change, like every other big company that Mike's been talking about, has to change to meet the challenges of the new and modern and up-to-date era. And actually, Sir Alex Ferguson got out at the right time. Had he gone on much longer, his methods would have seemed outdated. He'd have got too old. And so you needed somebody new, like Mourinho. Mourinho was actually almost begging for the job, and they decided not to give it to him.
If any Man United director is listening tonight, just get Mourinho and let's get it sorted out, because we're the biggest club in the world, and we just need some respect back. People are laughing at us, and it's just not. And we'd have to have the happening season at Liverpool.
Yeah, I know. Although there was one point of irony that we were talking about just before the show, actually, saying that Liverpool fans actually, it's a worst nightmare. They're in a prime position to win the football league tonight. Not tonight. This week, 5 points clear, and everyone's still talking about Man United.
Sure. Well, you're bound to, because they dominated the landscape for so long, didn't they? The other thing is, Mike, the relationship with the players. Reports emerging now that, the Tom Cleverley situation. Danny Welbeck, isn't it? Who sort of made out he
said he might want to leave.
That was apparently because Welbeck and Cleverley and Ashley Young were all disciplined for that incident in which they went out for a drink.
Oh, yeah.
Although it was 10 days before their next game, and they sort of held hands up and said, well, sorry, boss. Shoved off to train with the youngsters, and some of the senior players thought Davy Moyes was flexing his muscles against younger players rather than the senior players, and thought the guy's lost all his powers of leadership.
Yeah, interesting stuff. 08717 22 3344. We've got lots more to say about David Moyes. Keep your calls coming in. I'm Mike Graham. He is Mike Parry. We are the two Mikes. More coming up next. This is Talk Sport Extra Time. I'm Mike Graham. He is Mike Parry. 08717 22 3344. Jamie's a Liverpool fan in the Wirral. Says, Mike, I'm a Liverpool fan. And what about Moyes' replacement being Ryan Giggs, a man that knows the club, knows the players, and knows what they need moving on. He's a Man United legend, will have the dressing room and the backing. Maybe his lack of management will not hinder him. And I was saying this earlier that I think that it's all very well saying we want Jurgen Klopp, but apart from the fact he's got a massive contract at Borussia Dortmund,
has he?
They just signed a new one, which takes another 4 years. What he doesn't have is Premier League experience. What he doesn't have is experience of English football, if you like. And I don't mean to be xenophobic about this, but it's been shown that you need to know something about Manchester United to be a Man United manager.
Louis van Gaal hasn't had any of that experience.
No, he hasn't. And I think that would be a mistake as well.
He's a massive favourite to take over.
He is, because he's available. Yeah. That's the point. But Laurent Blanc, for example, who played for Manchester United, who's also just signed a new contract with PSG, because they suddenly moved at the weekend. Now, this is what I find quite interesting. Yes. They suddenly move at the weekend to re-sign him to a contract which otherwise wasn't going to happen. And you wonder whether they thought Manchester United were going to come for him.
I think the whisper was going through football that, and by the way, there were people urging Arsenal to get moving a week ago to get Louis van Gaal signed up, because they too thought, look, if anything happens at Manchester United, the first guy they'll go after, because he's available after the World Cup, he's already said it, is Louis van Gaal. And we might want him here at Arsenal.
And here's what I think about PSG. I don't think they necessarily want to keep Laurent Blanc, but what they want to do is say, well, Manchester United, if you want him, we've just signed him to a new 4-year contract, so it's going to cost you double.
Gives the 20 million that you'd have to pay for Mourinho.
Because that's the kind of politics that David Moyes doesn't understand.
It looks like, because they can't just appoint a new manager, can they, in 24 hours after David Moyes goes. It looks like Ryan Giggs will have some say in the running of the team after he's gone.
And Ryan Giggs and Nicky Butt, they're saying, because they hope that what it will do is lift the team and lift the fans, so that at least they have 3 decent games to watch at the end of the season. They don't mean anything.
Yeah. One other theory emerging tonight, Mike, is that actually Ryan Giggs will take over, but they'll immediately, if only on a short-term contract, bring back Rennie Moulenstein.
Yeah, well, they should have done that as soon as he lost his job at Fulham,
wasn't he?
Yeah.
In the managerial role, but is acknowledged as a great coach, and he would work alongside Ryan Giggs and try and bring back some of the Manchester United spirit.
Well, you might not remember this, but the night he was fired, I was on this very show.
Fulham or from United?
From Fulham, this very show, saying they should send a taxi straight down to Fulham, pick him up and take him right back up to... Because even then, things were going wrong.
Sure.
And he could have fixed them. Let's take another call. We'll take more of them as well. 08717 22 3344. George, a Spurs fan. George, very good morning to you.
Yeah, very good morning to you, Mike. Thanks for taking my call.
What would you like to say?
Yeah, I just want to say basically that it was obviously in my opinion, a big mistake taking Moyes on as a manager for Manchester United. He hadn't won anything. He's not established himself at all in terms of winning anything of any substance. I totally agree with the fact that Mourinho, or certainly a manager that's established himself on European football, would have been the perfect person to bring on board. We all know that what Alex Ferguson established at Manchester United will probably never be surpassed. But bringing somebody like Mourinho, who's already established in his own right in terms of the success that he's had, would have been the better appointment.
Yeah. Well, certainly I've said all along that the situation that Sir Alex Ferguson and Arsene Wenger now finds himself in, and David Moyes in a way did as well at Everton, is changing rapidly in this global kind of football world that we live in. Because you can't afford, for example, to be out of Champions League football for more than one season. You can't really afford to be out for one season anymore because things move on. The last 2 or 3 years of Sir Alex Ferguson's stewardship of Manchester United, they fell behind Manchester City, they fell behind Chelsea, they fell behind Liverpool as well, because they weren't really looking to the future.
Well, the thing is, I think Ferguson knew at the point when he retired that he knew that it was coming to an end. I mean, with all due respect to Moyes, he did take over a team that was ageing, but then we're talking about a team that was champions last season, and the fall has been quite spectacular. And I think when you look at the board, they're looking at it thinking, actually, we're not in Champions League football because mathematically it's impossible for them to qualify now. They'll probably struggle getting to Europa. So they're thinking, well, look, let's make a decision now, because obviously the team does need money thrown at it in terms of bringing in new players. There's a lot of old players that are playing there at the moment. Yeah.
George, can I just say to you there,
yeah.
You've come on because your original statement to us was Moyes was wrong in the first place.
Yeah.
And there's a story knocking around, has been for some weeks now, that right at the start of David Moyes' career as Manchester United manager, they were down in Australia. And he took his players for a walk on Bondi Beach. Now, he'd done that 2 years previously when he was with Everton, and it showed some nominal interest because Tim Cahill, who's Australia's most popular footballer, was a member of the Everton squad. But what happened when he took his players on the beach this time in Manchester United was they got mobbed. I mean, literally, people were coming from 10 and 15 miles around to see Manchester United. A riot, a sort of mini riot broke out, and David Moyes fled into a restaurant and commandeered the top floor to keep all these crazy fans. And, right from that moment, people have told me about this instance several times. From that moment, it seemed like David Moyes was overwhelmed and swamped with the responsibility of leading Manchester United.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think when you look at the body language of the players in the last couple of games, particularly with Everton, they've certainly down tools. What I didn't understand, Mike, was when Moyes took over, he got rid of the backroom staff and brought in his own people. I thought that was a mistake, because he should have gone in there.
It was a huge mistake, George. Huge
mistake. His way around a little bit and just get a little bit of understanding of the structure of Manchester United and get a little bit of a flavour in terms of the principles that Ferguson had left in there. Now, when he did that, I think he's sort of building a rod on his own back, really, when he got rid of all the stuff. And then apparently in some reporters, I'm sure you guys have picked up, Mike, that there was issues with gigs, for example.
Well, George, let me just build on what you said, because again, you've got it absolutely right. The point is, amongst all the coaching staff, apart from Phil Neville, who was a Manchester United old boy, it was a question of show us your medals, and there weren't any. And when David Moyes started showing the United defenders videos of Everton's defender, England defender, sorry.
Oh, what? But Steve Round?
No. Everton's defender, the centre-half for England. Come on, my head's gone completely.
What, Jagielka?
Jagielka, thank you. When David Moyes started showing United defenders videos of Jagielka and said, this is how you defend, this is how you move out, this is how you do that, one player,
that was a ridiculously stupid thing
one
to do,
player
wasn't
there said, hang on, how many medals has Jagielka won? In fact, Mr. Moyes, how many medals have you won to be showing us how Jagielka plays when we've actually conquered Europe?
Absolutely. George, we'll just have to let you go there because we've got a lot of other people to get on, but thanks very much for your call. But that's one of the questions I was going to ask you, because from the Everton point of view, I well remember that when David Moyes was not really tapped up, but it kind of tapped up by Fergie, there was a lot of resentment at Everton. There was a lot of sort of people who thought that David Moyes had behaved perhaps not as he should have done before the season even was over. He was already telling everyone that he was going to Manchester United. I mean, as far as Everton fans were concerned, what about the view that he was also ripping out the backroom staff from Everton as Roberto Martinez was coming in? I mean, was there anyone who wasn't happy about that?
Not really, because Steve Round, who went there as his deputy, was...
That's who I thought you were talking about before.
No, sorry, no.
Loss of memory.
Yeah, I did have a loss of memory. I know Steve...
You're feeling all right?
Feeling fine. Steve Round and David Moyes were joined at the hip, and they worked exclusively with each other. So, frankly, Steve Round wouldn't have stayed anyway. You know, once David Moyes had gone, even if David Moyes hadn't taken him with him, there wasn't really a role for Steve Round there. And anyway, we all know that when a new manager comes in, like Roberto Martinez, he's going to bring his own people with him. That's what they always do.
Generally speaking, but shouldn't have happened at Manchester United, let's face it.
No, I agree. It shouldn't have happened. But the problem was, when those players looked across at their bench and saw, remember, Phil Neville went 6 years ago to Everton because he wasn't deemed sufficiently good enough to hold his place in the Manchester United team. And then David Moyes brings him back. And David Moyes brings,
so coach,
Steve
as
Round.
you said, players like Ryan Giggs who didn't leave and stayed around.
And it just was never going to work.
Yeah.
It was never going to work when, it was the show us your medals issue. Yeah. And that's why the greatest mystery in this one, Mike, will be Sir Alex Ferguson's judgment. Because Sir Alex Ferguson also knows that to command a dressing room, you have to have the respect of the players for what you've helped them win.
Yeah.
And once the agents across Europe stopped sending their players to Manchester United because they weren't sure they were going to win anything, game was up. It was up in the first few weeks of the season.
No, of course. Well, let's have a listen to Danny Higginbotham. He was on TalkSport a little bit earlier, former Manchester United player, of course. Here's what he thinks went wrong.
You do have to look at the performances, and they have not been good enough. I like to think that I've probably backed David Moyes a lot, and because you want to give managers time, but yesterday when you look at it and you put everything together, yesterday was probably the tipping point of everything. They've got nothing to strive for now for the remainder of the season. So if a change is to take place, there's no harm in doing it now. If you are going to do it, it then gives them room for manoeuvre in terms of look for your manager, identify your players, because the World Cup's coming up as well, so you don't want to be rushing around after the World Cup.
That's Danny Higginbotham there talking about what went wrong, and it was basically the performances. But what I think also happened, Mike, which made things worse, was that Everton actually became so much better without David Moyes. And here's an interesting text here from Ruth, who's in Manchester. She says, how could anyone think Moyes could manage Manchester United when he could not do anything with Everton? Martinez should have gone to Old Trafford.
Well, do you know the funny thing is, I was talking to somebody this afternoon who said, actually, in a very simplistic way, David Moyes turned Manchester United into Everton and started them playing like they played at Everton, dithering Davy, caution comes first. And Roberto Martinez went to Everton, turned them into Manchester United. Yeah. And that's the way it looked on, if you'd have been colourblind or watching the game on black and white television on Sunday, the Everton-Manchester United game, you'd have thought that Everton were Manchester United from the way they played and that Manchester United were Everton. Yeah.
It was like they'd been completely and utterly reversed. Well, I was saying this earlier as well. One of the worst things that happened for David Moyes was that, and this was also pointed out in one of the pieces I read, was that, when he did arrive, and we talked a lot about this last night, last week, what was his reception going to be like? A lot of booing, not massive amounts, but quite a bit of booing when he turned out for the start of the game. But by the end of the game, they were all singing, Davey, give us away. Yeah. So, almost ridiculing him. And there was a guy standing there, which we know was a put-up job from one of the betting companies,
I don't know how he got in. Don't know how he got into the ground. It's amazing,
the picture that went around the world on social media.
Picture,
I mean, and with Moyes, with that ashen-looking face that he always has when he's managing United, standing there in the technical area with a Grim Reaper behind him.
I know.
I mean, can you imagine anyone doing that to Sir Alex Ferguson?
No,
it would not happen.
No, it wouldn't happen. He'd have got jumped on by fans and all that kind of stuff.
Well, Ferguson would have jumped on him.
Yes, Ferguson would have jumped on him.
Or thrown a shoe at him or something.
By the way, if you look at the pictures now of Davy Moyes 12 months ago and Davy Moyes today, I mean, that man has so visibly aged.
He looks like a Prime Minister 5 years later, doesn't he?
He does. It's like that picture you take of Tony Blair with his hair going grey. It's like the picture of Bill Clinton, whose hair went to Snow White. When he was trying to handle the Balkans conflict. That may have had more to do with
other things, though.
Well, it would do. In Bill Clinton's case, he was trying to keep all his secrets of his secret lust away from Hillary, his wife, who could be the next US president as well. But the point I'm making is you can see the strain. And by the way, we haven't even said yet, we haven't issued one word of sympathy for Davy Moyes. I've got a lot of sympathy for Davy Moyes because I know him personally, which I'll tell you about in a minute. Right. Thank you for inviting me to stay on for another session with you after 3 o'clock, Mike, or will be revealed then.
This is Talk Sport Extra Time, and Mike, I'd like to get to some of the stories you want to tell us about Manchester United and about David Moyes at Everton as well. But I also want to ask the callers as well about Sir Alex Ferguson and how he's been damaged by all of this. And here's a text from somebody who sent this into 81089. Ferguson has a lot to answer for. The midfield that needed repairing for the past 5 years, the selling of young talent like Paul Pogba was a massive mistake, and the appointment of Moyes itself was a complete joke.
Yeah, the thing is that Sir Alex Ferguson left at the right time because he had just about completed the series of miracles he was able to perform without a massive transfer budget. Right. Because of the debt landed on the club by the Glazers and the amount that has to be taken out for interest payments on loans.
Which is the other reason they can't just suddenly go and bust the budget and go and buy Jose Mourinho.
Exactly. I think he felt that the struggle was going to be too great in the future and it was time for a new and younger man to come in, i.e. David Moyes. But the two massive mistakes were that there was no consultation about David Moyes coming. It's just his word, did it and said it. And nobody at Old Trafford even sat down and said, can we think this through and see if it's going to work? It was just Ferguson's own decision. I mean, as you quite rightly said about any major corporation, to appoint somebody on the hoof of one man's instinct and without sitting down in a boardroom and saying, what's the pluses and minuses of this guy? Yeah. He hasn't won anything ever. Is he right for this club? Yeah. So that was the first mistake. But the second mistake, mate, which you haven't got onto yet, was the presence of Sir Alex Ferguson up in that stand behind David Moyes at every game. Right. It was so damaging.
Was like the Grim. You wondered whether actually the guy in the Grim Reaper costume was actually Sir Alex Ferguson.
It was a very similar apparition, whether the guy had a Grim Reaper costume on or whether it was Sir Alex Ferguson in his mohair overcoat, shaking his head, after...
And looking like death, really.
Looking like death and shaking his head, despairingly after another home defeat. I mean, it simply didn't work, did it?
Absolutely incredible. And the other situation with Sir Alex Ferguson is that not only, did he have the kind of power to do that there, but this is why I'm saying I believe that his own brand has been damaged because according to the reports we're reading in the papers this morning, he will take no role in choosing the new manager. And that tells me that the board have wised up. The board have worked out that actually they're not going to take his advice anymore. So where does that leave him? That leaves him just like any other ambassador for Man United, doesn't it?
Well, he's £2 million a year ambassador, and that's one reason why he was allowed to have input into his replacement. But what I'm saying is now he's going to be sitting in the background. I'm reading reports saying that the Glazers barely talk to him now because they've fallen out over this whole thing. I haven't done for a couple of months. You're absolutely right. And also, if they're going to be absolutely ruthless about this, they've got to ban him from the stadium when the new manager comes in, because you can't have the same scenario as Sir Alex Ferguson sitting up there, because on this occasion, Sir Alex Ferguson can't even give his full support to the new manager publicly, because that will exemplify the terrible mistake he made in supporting David Moyes as his appointment. So it's going to be a real old can of worms. The other thing, Mike, which I've been hearing in the last few weeks, in talking about Sir Alex Ferguson and David Moyes, is that actually David Moyes tried too hard with the players because he was a real tracksuit, roll up your sleeves, get into every coaching session with them, playing in the five-a-sides. So Alex Ferguson wasn't seen that often at the training ground. He left that to Mullenstein and people like that. And also, what would they want David Moyes for? Because again, it can come back to this thing like, we've won all these cups, we've won all these, Premier League titles. Yeah. What are you showing us? Exactly, to be out there on the training pitch himself in five-a-sides and saying to the boys, this is how you do it. You can only do that if you're Glenn Hoddle, really, can't you? You know what I mean? Exactly. And you've come with a playing record, absolutely beyond belief. Yeah. And the boys say, well, if Glenn says that's the way to do it, I suppose that's the way we've got to do it. But Davy Moyes should have been a more distant manager, according to the people I'm talking to. Yeah. And by the way, your manager can get in your face to the point when you start to resent him, you don't like him, and you're not playing for him. And Sir Alex Ferguson knew this and kept his distance. If the players saw him more than 2 or 3 times a week for an hour at a time, that was about it. Well, Gordon Hill also said, because that's the other amazing statistic, and I've got some fantastically, revealing statistics about the failure of David Moyes' kind of administration, is that, here's a guy who would not pick the same 11 players twice in any Premier... he didn't in 51 games, did he? In 51 games, he has not started with the same team. And Gordon Hill said earlier on the show, as an ex-Man United player, he says, your head goes down if you have a great game and next week you're not picked. You don't understand why. Your relationship goes out the window, your confidence drops, and that's what's happened. But also, if you're playing up front like, Rooney and Van Persie, I know Van Persie's had this really bizarre injury run and all that, but you're absolutely right. You just think you're developing a relationship with somebody in your position, whether it be midfield, whether it be forward, maybe 2 centre-halves playing off each other, and all of a sudden next week you blame somebody else.
Well, Arsenal fans will tell you that Rooney and Van Persie, he gets injured quite a lot when he's unhappy. And the season that he won so much for Manchester United.
Dutch players do, allegedly.
Yeah, and I wonder if Dutch managers would be the same. Let's talk to Paul, who's a Man United fan down in Bournemouth. Hello, Paul. Very good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, very well. What would you like to say, Paul?
Just like to say that I don't really understand all that it's Moyes' fault and then he's got to leave. Basically, no one's going to be able to take over from Sir Alex Ferguson. It's an impossibility.
No, it's not. It's not.
We're not that far out of the top four. I agree with you. I love United playing total football, but half the team should be ashamed of themselves. They really should.
Just before we go any further, you're 13 points off the top four.
Yeah. So you might as well be on the moon.
And you're 23 points off Liverpool at the top. And the gap in this time last season, I think it's right in saying, between Liverpool and Manchester United, the switch is something like 50 points.
Yeah, it's 27 points the other way last season.
Yeah, I've got a Chelsea mate, unfortunately, and
everybody's got to cross the bear.
I know. When we actually summed up the season last season, I said that's the year that Ferguson won it.
Yeah,
that is actually. It was a crap Man United team.
Yeah, Paul, if you don't mind me saying...
He said to me, he said, what are you annoyed about? They've won it by 11 points. I don't think David Moyes has got a team that he needs or a team that he wants, barring about 4 players.
Now, Paul...
He needs to revamp it, but he needs the chance to revamp it.
Well, he's not going to get it now, is he? This is the point. A new era is coming. Davy Moyes is going. Now, Paul, I can't understand. Look, I admire your loyalty for coming on defending Davy Moyes. I would defend Davy Moyes personally as a man. I know him well, and he's a good guy, but he's failed on this occasion. He was known as Dithering Davy. You're going to be known to me as Pulsating Paul, because for some unknown reason, you're trying to put up some argument that Davy Moyes should be given another chance. What? Until you get relegated, like you were last time? The super manager, Matt Busby, left and you eventually went down?
What, you've given me a pulsating chance here. I'm not saying he's going to do that brilliantly next season, but at least give the guy enough time to create his own team.
The thing that I've been saying, Paul, all season. Hang on a second. I think I've been saying all season is that in the modern football world, it's not like when Sir Alex Ferguson took over 26 years ago.
No.
You can't give 2 years without the Champions League. Manchester United won't be able to bring any players in. They will fall further and further and further away, as Liverpool did, and they'll be out of contention for nearly 2 decades. And that's what they can't afford. Paul, I appreciate your call. Let's talk to Tyrone, who's a Man United fan in London. Tyrone, a very good morning to you.
How you doing, mate?
Great name, by the way.
Yeah. Actually, Tyrone in Coronation Street is a big Manchester United fan in real life, because I've been to a lunch with him in Manchester. Please go on, Tyrone.
I reckon the next manager's got to be Klopp. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about Van Gaal, but for me, the main guy's got to be Jurgen Klopp. I mean...
Yeah, but he's just signed a new contract with Borussia Dortmund, and as I've said earlier, this is a guy who's pretty much guaranteed to get Champions League football for the rest of his life if he stays with the second best team in Germany. Why would he come to Manchester United except for a bucket load of money?
Yeah.
It's because of the challenge. I mean, Man United, no offence to Dortmund, it's a really massive club.
Yeah,
it's the Premier League as well.
I agree. Here, Tyrone, Mike and I have just had a reader's survey put in front of us, OK? This is an online thing, OK? And it's the 5 top contenders for Old Trafford, and you've hit the nail on the head, because amongst the fans... Sorry, it's a fan survey, not a reader's survey. It's a fan survey. It says Jurgen Klopp is wanted by 49% of United fans questioned. Louis van Gaal is wanted by 13%. And then, amazingly, the third most popular candidate amongst the fans would be Roberto Martinez at 10%, then Diego Simeone, the Atletico Madrid boss, at 8%, and finally Carlo Ancelotti at 6%. So you're right on the number there. You're thinking the way most Manchester United fans are thinking, according to this survey.
I reckon they'll get him in. I reckon they'll get Klopp in without a shadow of a doubt.
Well, it's going to cost them a lot of money, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I mean, my other reservation, as I've said earlier, Tyrone, thanks for your call, to you, Mike, is that, I think it's very important particularly after this experience that David Moyes has had, that whoever comes in to manage Manchester United now has some knowledge of the club, i.e. has some connection, which is why I quite like the idea of Laurent Blanc, even though he's now signed up with Paris Saint-Germain.
Is he that good, Laurent Blanc?
Well, he played...
as a manager.
Well, it's not a question of how good he is, it's a question of what he's immersed in, and I think the problem for David Moyes is he knows nothing about Manchester United, right?
No.
Apart from his friendship with Sir Alex Ferguson, perhaps.
Well, exactly, yeah.
But Manchester United is a sort of culture. You need to know what it's like to be at the absolute white-hot kind of tip of the publicity around that club, which he was clearly frightened of. He couldn't handle it. You need to understand the Premier League, which with all due respect to Jurgen Klopp, he doesn't. You need to understand the English media, which play a big part. I mean, we're getting a lot of calls here from people and texts and social media messages saying, the media's had it in for David Moyes. I don't believe that for a second. However, you do have to be able to withstand pressures in places that you don't get them in other parts of the world.
I totally agree. In this very studio, Mike, about 5 years ago now, when Everton got to the 2009 FA Cup final, Bill Kenwright, the Everton chairman, came in here and a couple of days before the final to talk with us for an hour about the final. And, of course, he talked about his manager. And he said, I remember distinctly, he was sitting in this chair next to me, and he actually said, David Moyes could manage Barcelona, David Moyes could manage Bayern Munich. He is a brilliant manager, the best I've ever worked with, can work at any club in the world. Yeah. Now, he clearly and firmly believed that. And he also is a good friend of Sir Alex Ferguson's. Yeah. And so what I'm saying is there was a general perception within football, and perhaps we're blaming Sir Alex Ferguson too much, that David Moyes was a highly competent man and a great coach, stroke manager, call him what you want. But, of course, the acid test, which is putting the man in a position saying, do the job, failed. Yeah. And you can't go any other way about it. I'm afraid David Moyes has failed terribly.
No question.
It's all very well people saying, well, it's OK, because he'll wake up tomorrow and sign a bit of paper which will give him £5 million. 1 year's money, apparently, was the deal if he went...
he's already had £5 million, so that's £10 million he'll walk away with.
£10 million in a year. But... you know that, and I'm afraid I have to reveal to our listeners that you do know this feeling, Mike. You wake up one morning when you've suddenly had the old tin tack the night before, and you think, what am I going to do today? And it's a ghastly, horrible, sick-in-the-stomach feeling.
But I imagine you'd feel a lot better about it if you had £10 million in the bank, which I've never had.
I think Davies being such a highly paid manager, he was very well paid at Everton. I think his contract at Everton was approaching £3 million. I mean, he was wonderfully well paid because they rated him so highly. And so what I'm saying is, when you're paid that sort of money for so many years, you take the money for granted. It's all about your professional pride and your want to get up and go and put a pair of football boots on.
Yeah, I get all that, but I still don't feel sorry for him. Porky does.
I do.
Some of you may do because you're a bit more compassionate than I am. I've been accused quite often in the past of lacking compassion.
Well, you do lack compassion in all sorts of ways. So leave your dog at home.
All right, never mind that.
3 days after you buy a dog, you leave it in a kennel. I'm going to tell
you a story about him in a minute.
And you push off to America.
Which will melt your heart.
You have no compassion.
No, it'll melt your heart. 08717 22 33 44. Thanks for the Easter egg, by the way. Loads more coming from the two mics. This is TalkSport Extra Time. I'm Mike Graham. He is Mike Parry. Together we are the two Mikes. You will find a podcast, of course, on iTunes in a few hours' time. This is a special edition, though, of the two Mikes on a Monday night. It's longer because of the fact that the calamitous situation going on at Old Trafford. The Stock Exchange is saying, basically, and I've explained this earlier, but just to do it again. Yesterday, when the rumours hit the New York Stock Exchange that Moyes was going to be sacked, the share price dropped by 2%. Now, it doesn't sound like much, but that's, a few billion quid is 2%. And, when they stabilised it a bit later on the day with their statement that he hadn't been sacked, they also now know that that when he is finally sacked, there will be a massive effect on the share price. Yeah. Not necessarily because people are upset that Moyes has gone, but because of the way that it's all happened and the admission, as I said to you, that they've made this terrible error, which they're now going to have to correct.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Mike. I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but you've said to two callers now, they can't have Klopp, he's under contract and all that. And I think you're right. I think that on announcing David Moyes' departure, they will want to announce a big-name replacement.
Yes, exactly.
And of course, Van Gaal is immediately available after the World Cup.
Should we not be calling him Van Gaal, though? That's what everybody else seems to be calling him.
I call him Van Gaal.
All right.
Okay.
Well, you're entitled to call him whatever you like, but the correct pronunciation is Van Gaal.
He's the Dutchman, and he works there with Steve McCann. I call him Louis Van Gaal. Anyway, look, we mustn't be light-hearted.
No, we're not. No, we are being serious.
Shall I tell you why I have some affection for David Moyes?
Go on, there.
Well, whenever I met him at Everton, he was always charming and affable. And by the way, when this sort of thing happens, people of a weaker spirit would take to drink, you know what I mean? Yeah. To try and bolster their damaged ego, their hurt, their wounded pride, their sense of loss.
Well, not everybody turns to drink.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Well, Davy Moyes certainly won't. I've never seen him with a glass of alcohol in his hand.
Do you think that he treated you with kid gloves slightly because he knew that you were quite matey with his boss, the chairman?
I doubt that very much indeed. I mean, when you say I'm matey with his chairman, I know of Bill Kenwright, but Bill Kenwright knows thousands of people because he's the world's biggest theatre impresario. So I don't think that would have worried him too much. There's always very famous faces at Everton. Martin Shaw and
all your lovely mates.
No. And
what's her name? The girl's name?
Who? Jenny Seagrove.
Well,
Jenny Seagrove is Bill's partner in life, and in fact, I'm going to her birthday party quite soon.
Oh, super!
Yes, that's thanks for reminding me.
You do a little recital while you're there.
But also, that great West End actor who starred in Some Others Do Have 'Em, Michael Crawford. Michael Crawford. I've seen him.
Star of Phantom of the Opera.
Star of Phantom of the Opera.
He's not an Everton fan as well, is he?
Well, yes and no. The point is, he and Bill were doing a new production, so Bill brought him along to Chelsea, and I had the pleasure of having lunch with him, so it's very good. But anyway, look, getting back to Davy Moyes, I've told you the story about Scunthorpe, but I'll tell you it again for those listeners who haven't heard it before. I drive all the way up to Scunthorpe, up the A1, very early on a Saturday morning, January, mist in the fields.
Was this an FA Cup match or something?
FA Cup third round, and we're playing Scunthorpe, right? And get up there, there's only one decent hotel in the environs of Scunthorpe town, and I don't say that with any disrespect to Scunthorpe, but it's a hotel and country club, golf club type thing on the edge of town. I go and check in there. To my delight, I see the Everton coach there, so I know they're there. I meet Davy in the hall because I was arguing with the receptionist about my room. I booked this 2 weeks ago. It's a suite. I want it. And, well, I'm sorry, but the current occupant hasn't vacated it yet. I said, well, get him out.
Right.
And so
charming.
It was David Moyes. I didn't realise it was David Moyes. It was in my suite because I was staying that night, and obviously the team were going home after the game.
Right.
But anyway, as I went up the corridor towards the room, Davy came out. We had a long chat for about, 10, 15 minutes about the game. And then, remarkably, I sneaked off to the bar to have a quick drink because I didn't want the chairman to see me because he doesn't like me to drink because I have a heart problem.
Right.
And I was waiting outside the front of the hotel when the Everton coach pulled off and went off.
I remember this story because we talked about it on the air,
didn't we? And the windows were blackened, so you couldn't see through the windows. But I waved because I thought, well, they're on the team coach and that. To my amazement, Mike, the coach stopped. And one of the guys, one of Davies' assistants, jumped off and says, Mike, boss says, do you want to lift to the ground? We've got one spare seat. And they had one spare seat.
Right.
And actually went to the ground on the Everton coach, sitting opposite the manager on FA Cup third round day. He brought my schoolboy dream to fruition and made it true.
And I actually remember
I've
talking to him.
I've got to thank him for that.
And we talked to him the following Monday, I seem to remember, on the mid-morning show.
I think we did.
And I remember, and he was very funny about it because I was sort of joking, as we do, about your appearance and how you looked and whether you were very dishevelled.
Are you mad?
And I remember saying to him, did you not think that that this person you were picking up looked a bit like a tramp or something? Were you feeling sorry for him?
No.
And he kind of went along with the joke. But the point is that he was great about it,
and
and I think there's no doubt, I don't think, in anybody's mind that he's a decent guy. And I think he secretly, and I know you say it's horrible when you wake up the next day and you haven't got a job, I think he secretly will be heaving a sigh of relief because
I don't.
He couldn't handle it. He was looking terrible, looking more and more worried every single time you looked at him. And it will be good for him in the end.
But I think his reputation has been horribly shredded in the worst possible way on a worldwide platform. The other thing is there are pictures in tomorrow morning's papers, which our listeners will see at sort of 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, of him and his wife Pamela, who is the most delightful woman. Met her on a number of occasions, at Goodison, and she'll be a rocker, supports him and all that kind of stuff. And so you worry about the effect it'll have on his family as well. But I mean, look, you've got to be very professional about this, and United have made the right decision. They had to. There was only one decision to be made.
Let's talk to Pav, who's a Man United fan up in Harrow. Hi, Pav.
Morning, gents.
Morning, man. What would you like to say, Pav?
Good to hear the two PG rated, as I used to call you. I used to love listening to your mid-morning show, so pleasure to finally be down. Good to hear Mr. Parry's keeping healthy.
It's very kind of you, Pav, and we're worth getting up in the middle of the night for, believe me.
Well, still talking rigmarole, but there you go.
Good
anyway, the point I wanted to make was, I endorse what you just said, Mike, about the correct decision being made, but I just think there were certain things just during the course of the season. I mean, I've had chats with Mike Graham about this at various times, the Chelsea game where he didn't bring anybody on, etc.
Sure.
But the angle I wanted to come from, Mike, was this. That the whole Rooney scenario, where Rooney for the second time left a rather acerbic taste in a lot of United fans' mouths because he basically took advantage of the club at a weaker juncture and got his way effectively. I think that the Moyes departure actually makes Wayne Rooney's position extremely questionable, because if you get Van Gaal coming in, and Mike, it is Van Gaal and it is Bulgaria, it's not Van Gaal and Bulgaria. But anyway,
thank you for pointing that out, Pav. Thank you.
Yeah, right. I couldn't resist after Clips of the Week. But anyway.
Yes, thank you for the elocution lesson. Yes.
No problem. I think that it brings into his position at the club into question, because basically Ferguson had been there. I think it was no surprise he would have gone, and it was almost as if Moyes, he utilised Moyes' weakness at the time, because clearly I think everybody accepted that we couldn't let him go because it wouldn't have looked very good on the club. And I think it brings into his question, and what it basically does, it means not just do we need an established start, we need someone who can be strong, Mike, who can make the decisions. I mean, the Bayern Munich game, I thought to myself, and I'm talking about the second leg, if you talk about that, Rooney was poor, and he's been poor in a lot of the big games this season. But Moyes wasn't big enough to be able to haul him off the way an established manager would. And I think that was one of the biggest problems. As a manager, if you're basically serving an apprenticeship at a club as big as ours, with all due respect, you're going to fail, because you are not going to have it within yourself to take these big egos off.
Well,
and that's the problem.
Do you know, Pav, you have identified a crucial issue here and a crucial problem, because it actually goes a little bit beyond what you've just said. First of all, David Moyes had to build bridges with Wayne Rooney because they fell out at Everton many years ago over a publication in a newspaper, which was eventually resolved in the courts, but that's outside of courts, but that's fine. But the thing is, once Davy Moyes had made it clear to the world, and that means the rest of the Manchester United squad, that Wayne Rooney was his prime objective in terms of trying to settle him down and get him in. Once the headlines started
Which,
flashing...
by the way, let's not forget, Sir Alex Ferguson threw a huge grenade into that relationship by saying that Rooney had asked for a transfer when nobody had actually said he had.
Exactly. In between Sir Alex Ferguson leaving and Davy Moyes actually starting, Sir Alex Ferguson said, well, Rooney asked to away. He wanted away.
Yeah,
that was his expression, yeah. But the point I'm getting to, Pav, is this. Once all the focus was on Rooney, the man who was most frustrated about that was Van Persie, right? Van Persie felt that to be treated as an equal with every other player was unfair because he'd scored 30 goals to win the Premier League Championship the season before. And once he saw the sheer effort and energy that David Moyes was putting into retaining Wayne Rooney on a massively increased salary, and the thoughts that, well, this all goes back to his days at Everton once again and all that, Van Persie became terribly disillusioned. And so what you've said is absolutely right, but it went even further. It wasn't just that, he didn't get on with Van Persie. He got on too well with Rooney, which affected the Persie relationship.
Don't you think, though, that briefly, I'll try and keep it as short as I can, that accentuates the whole indecisiveness. At the start of the season,
Definitely.
or pre-season, he makes this unequivocal statement, Robin Van Persie is my number one because of what Van Persie did last season. He then changes mid-range because Rooney wants to leave. You can't come out and make statements as the manager, especially in this day and age with all the social media, everything else.
Absolutely
I'm not being funny, you sneeze wrong, and it's around the world, especially if you're United, and I just think this was the problem. And this was the thing that they should have looked into, and this is why, unfortunately, I hold Sir Alex and the board responsible, who's a unanimous decision it was apparently to hire him, is that you can't serve an apprenticeship. You can't come to Manchester United, Madrid, Barcelona wearing P plates, and that's exactly what we were doing, because at the end of the day, you're doomed to failure.
Pav, you're absolutely right.
Well,
we've got to let you go because we've got loads more to fit in, and we haven't got a great deal more time to fit it in. Mike, this is going brilliantly. We've got lots more calls to take. 08717 223344. Got an Arsenal fan who's texted in called Nathan. We're going to read out what he says coming up next. More of your calls. It's Mike Graham and Mike Parry, the two Mikes on TalkSport.
You and I are not the same. You say you like the sun, I like the rain.
This is TalkSport Extra Time. We are the two Mikes. He's Mike Parry, I'm Mike Graham. Tom has noticed something. He says you two are agreeing a lot tonight. He says you should get a room, because we don't normally agree on many things.
No, we don't.
But we don't just always talk about football either.
Usually I have more knowledge on a situation than you do.
Well, no, it's not necessarily that.
You're surprisly well read on this one.
Well, thank you very much indeed. We're going to talk actually now to a guy who's going to tell us a little bit about what's developing in the United States, because one of the things that's so important about this whole situation is that Manchester United are going to have to inform the New York Stock Exchange of their plans, and it could be as soon as today. Paul McFarland is the St. Louis-based chairman of the Midwest branch of the Man United Supporters Club. Paul, a very good morning to you and welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Now, clearly, the shockwaves are going around the world with this story. People believe that David Moyes could go as soon as, later on today, which is Tuesday, of course, here in the UK, or it might be sometime before the next game, or it could be certainly before the end of the season. One of the big aspects of importance is the pressure that's going to be brought to bear from the shareholders in the United States. What's the situation, Paul, as far as you know about that?
Well, it's a lot of rumor, and if it wasn't for rumor, we wouldn't be talking now, would we? But of course, it's all about money. The amount of money you can forecast and lose without Champions League the next year, it's serious.
Right.
And,
because the share price has taken a bit of a battering over the last few months, hasn't it?
Yeah, a bit. But I think part of it is his analysis that it's going to be a strong stock. But then the Glazers, with all the debt they brought into, they're watching the dollars always. So I'll just wait and see.
Right, and one of the reasons, of course, that people are concerned as investors is, as Mike Parry said a bit earlier, Man United will want to announce that they've got somebody big coming in, not just that they're going to sort of make do with Ryan Giggs maybe until the end of the season.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah. I mean, do I have to say we're a big club?
You don't.
So it has to be something big anyway, or it has to be patience, and so we'll see.
Who would you like to see coming in?
Well, let's just say, of all the names, the one I thought was the funniest was Diego Simeone, because that means someone doesn't remember June 30th, 1998.
What, you mean when he got David Beckham sent off?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know whether David Beckham's going to have any sway over it. I dare say he's probably quite quietly enjoying Sir Alex Ferguson's difficulties at the moment. Paul, thanks very much indeed. We'll catch up with you later on in the week, I'm sure, once something else develops. But, Mike, let's talk about, what the future holds for Manchester United, because over the course of the next, 3 matches, we're going to find out whether Man United are going to be in the Europa League. I'm sure there are loads of people at Old Trafford that would like to see that not happening, because not least of them is Edward Woodward, because they want to make money, and they want to go on these friendly tours of Asia, of America, and all that. They don't want to be in the Europa League. But can you foresee a situation whereby the summer comes and goes, and no big players, as you were saying, because their agents tell them not to, come to United because there's no Champions League football?
See, Louis van Gaal is so all connected in the world of football. I mean, he's a Champions League winner, remarkably not with Ajax. I think it was 95, wasn't it? It was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago,
95, that's nearly 20 years ago.
Yeah, but it was still the European Cup.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, of course it was, yeah. And so, the super agents, as they're known now, the Zini Pahivi, or whatever his name is. Was it Parvi Zini or something?
I don't think you've got either of those right. I have no idea who that is.
Anyway, he'll, he'll...
You mean the guy who represents Pep Guardiola?
Yes, exactly, yeah. He'll be taking...
Isn't it his brother?
Calls from... Sorry?
Isn't it his brother?
No. It's anyway,
I want to Pep Guardiola's brother was a big agent.
Well, he may be, but I'm talking about somebody else, aren't I? So there we are. The super agent, the young fella. Right now, then, what I'm saying is that man.
You don't mean that corruption guy, do you?
No, of course I don't. No. Just let's get on with the story. Right. So what I'm saying is that man will be in contact with Louis van Gaal on the basis that he's got players who would like to play for Manchester United under Louis van Gaal, but who didn't want to play for Manchester United under David Moyes. Now, when you say about what happens in the future, I mean, this is going to sound terribly churlish, and I'm going to be accused of being anti-Liverpool again, but supposing Manchester United had been a real force this season, would Liverpool have been allowed free rein to run away, which is what they're doing at the moment with the Premier League title?
I don't think anybody could have stopped them, to be honest, but listen to this from Derek, who's, from South Wales, as a Liverpool fan of 43 years. He says, and it's addressed to you, Porky, he says, if Fergie hadn't said that Moyes was the right man to take his place, do you really think that he would have been given the job in the first place?
No,
and the message for the United fans who said that everyone was laughing at Manchester United, it's no different from the past 20 or so years when United fans have been laughing at Liverpool's plight. I think there's no doubt there's a lot of people out there who are quite enjoying Manchester United's difficulties at the moment.
Well, of course they are, because that who was it, the famous philosopher who said, every time one of my friends or colleagues suffers a blow, my heart leaps a little. It's
no idea.
Was
he a Greek philosopher?
No, he wasn't. No, he was some European philosopher, and that's a natural human feeling. That Schadenfreude, for want of a better word, is something.
German word, that.
It is a German word. You're absolutely right. What's the German word for cabbage?
I've no idea.
No, you do, because we went to that German restaurant in New York.
Well,
sauerkraut, that's right, yeah, sauerkraut. Yeah, but I don't know.
Sauerkraut isn't just a word for cabbage. Sauerkraut is a particular type of cooking of cabbage.
Anyway, look, sorry, let's not...
talking about cabbage.
Exactly, let's get serious, come on. What I'm saying is, the point I'm making is that whatever happens now has got to happen quickly, because if it doesn't, it means United will have another lost season next season, won't they? If they don't get everything into place now so that the minute this season finishes, they start planning for next season, they're going to be in trouble again.
And that's what they did wrong, my belief, as soon as they announced that Moyes was the new manager. Scott is a Man United fan in Peterborough. Hello, Scott.
Yeah. Hi, guys.
Yeah, hi. What would you like to say?
Hi, Scott.
Well, basically, I think that Ferguson was obviously given carte blanche to name his successor. I think that was something that he kind of earned. Manchester United are a behemoth in kind of global kind of organisation they are now, mainly due to Ferguson.
True, that's true.
But you can't just blame Ferguson. It was people like Ed Woodward and the Glazers had the final decision on it, so they cannot be kind of exonerated completely.
Well, I think they cannot be exonerated because they allowed Fergie to make that decision, and with the best one in the world, he was a fantastic manager, but he was not the guy that should have done that.
The major mistake was trying to find another Ferguson, because you never find another Ferguson in a million years.
No.
There'll never be another Brian Clough, there'll never be another Bill Shankly, Bob Paisley. They thought that they looked for like a long-term successor. What they should have done is gone, which I think what they'll do now, is go for a short-term guy who'll look after the club for 3 or 4 years, bring a Giggs or a Neville in.
You're absolutely right here, because the vital component in this is old Ed Woodward. Because if Ferguson, can you imagine the conversation when it first started? Ferguson goes to see Ed Woodward, who then probably rings up the Glazier brothers. And
See, Ed Woodward has got a background at Manchester United in marketing.
Yes, I know.
Department. He knows nothing to do with the actual technical side of the game. So obviously he had to bow to Ferguson's greater knowledge.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't, Scott, because this is the point I'm making. He goes to him and says, I'm going to quit, but don't worry, I've found a successor, it's David Moyes. Scott could have said, on what grounds are you nominating David Moyes? And Ferguson was, I'm not nominating him, he's getting the job.
Why would they ask Scott?
Sorry?
Why would they ask Scott?
No.
Yeah, but they never advertise a job, so that's the first thing.
That's the first mistake.
Well, that's
any time
job.
in business you don't advertise a job is when you promote internally.
No, but the point, Scott, about all of this is that Arsenal are going to be in the same situation because they have got Arsene Wenger, and only Arsene Wenger is the man that knows anything about football at Arsenal, right? Because David Dean's gone. When he goes, they won't know what to do either. And I think you're right. Edward Woodward is the marketing man who took over from Gill, didn't know what to do.
Gianluca Vialli said if it had been in Italy or Spain or Germany, he'd have been sacked 3 times before the new year.
Oh, I totally agree. But Scott, the point is that
look at what happened to Hodgson at Liverpool.
Scott, the point is, because there was nobody there to put their foot on the brake and say to Sir Alex Ferguson, I'm not sure about this.
There was no major figure there who could stand up to Ferguson.
But that's the point, and this is why I'm saying, and I think I could be proved right on this one, Scott, thanks for your call, that Fergie's reputation has now been harmed irreparably, is that when they now choose a manager, they're not going to ask Fergie for his opinion.
Of course not.
He's not involved in the decision-making process.
He's completely out the loop. But just to clarify a point Scott made there, and I don't know why you asked me while I was...
Yeah, because you got mixed up with the names, basically. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have picked you up on it, but I did because other people will.
That's okay, don't worry, mate. It was Ed Woodward, of course, I was talking about. Yeah. No, the point I was going to make was... I forgot what point I was going to make.
What's the point you
well, I don't know, because you've distracted me. No, what I was going to say to him is that if Ed Woodward didn't realise his corporate responsibility to call a meeting of the board to discuss such a big issue, because when you just said the job wasn't advertised because not for 1 second was there a vacancy.
Right.
So Alex Ferguson decided I'm going, but he's also said I've decided who's going to be my replacement.
And you can imagine
there was
vacancy. No one at Old Trafford who wanted to stick their head over the parapet and say, excuse me, is this a good idea?
Exactly.
A great big gun would have come out and fired their head off, and it would have been from Alex Ferguson. But listen, it's been tremendous. We want to keep your calls coming in. 08717 223344. We've had a special extended version of the two mics. We've had some great insight from Mr. Parry about what Mr. Moyes is actually like. I'm sure Mike will be talking a lot more about this on Thursday night.
Indeed.
When you're in for 3 hours, because the Moyes story does not go away. He may well be out of a job by then. He may not, but certainly he's on the slippery slope, I think. And a final word from you on when you think it might happen.
Well, the thing is, Mike, his credibility is shot to pieces now. I do not believe that David Moyes can turn up on the training field at Carrington tomorrow, which is Manchester United's training ground, and look his players in the face. He can't. Because any one of them who's picked up a newspaper on the way to work tomorrow, any one of them who's watched Sky Sports News or listened to Talk Sport Radio, can imagine how Al will get stuck into it tomorrow with Brian Moore. Well, I mean, these players will be listening to TalkSport on their radio in the car on the way to training to be told virtually your boss is gone.
Yeah.
So how can David Moyes turn up and look them in the eye? It's all over, I'm afraid. Sad to say, but at 3:45 on this day, and this day is, what's this day, Mike? It's April the 22nd, 2014, we can officially announce, that's MG and myself, that for David Moyes, I'm afraid it's kaput.
The party's over. He's Mike Parry, I'm Mike Graham. We've got loads more coming up on TalkSport. Winners and losers from the weekend next.